Sonic Boom Episode 10, Soul Power. We start out hearing an eagle, and Tails brings Sonic to the canyon, and shows him that he has a voice-activated floating engine, which can give him a sundae, but it gives him the wrong flavor of ice cream. And when Sonic asks for another one, it sends ice cream at him, and Tails thinks it's a glitch. That's some glitch. Came off more as it wanting revenge on Sonic. How delusional. Sonic runs away, and now all of a sudden his running does cause a sonic boom which hurts people's ears. After all this time of that consequence not existing. And his running causes the vehicle Tails is in to go crazy and end up almost falling into some lava. So Sonic, who happens to return to him for no reason, spin attacks him to save him. He snarks at Tails when he almost died that it was his fault because he was screaming in a voice-activated device. Then Sonic runs away and Tails screams again. So Tails pointlessly decides to run some tests that just involve Sonic using his speed. And naturally that doesn't teach him anything because he was just using his speed like last time. So since Tails the genius couldn't figure out a cure for him, he just tells Sonic to stop going fast. It was amusing that after Sonic is told to walk slowly and deliver them the ball, some peaceful violin music plays as he walks around bored, and he says this is nuts. It turns out he only walked a short distance, despite the montage and the fact that we saw him moving across a map. So I was wondering why he had to go so far to get the ball. That was funny. Not laugh funny, though. The heroes fight some robots, and Knuckles gets attacked after Sonic cheers him on for once, saying to do another left and right. Then he tells Styx to do a spin attack, and she says that's only his move, and gets attacked. Then after he tells Amy to do a triple backflip move, she gets grabbed by the robot because Sonic gave advance warning about what you do. So the heroes tie him to a tree because Sonic was somehow inconveniencing his friends by talking to them. Why would tying him to a tree solve their... He's talking, so why wouldn't they just put duct tape over his mouth? It pisses me off so much that Sonic was this incompetent. Then Eggman shows up and says sadly that the robots only got sent at them because Orbot and Cubot were dusting and accidentally hit a button in the layer, and he says he feels unneeded. It does make sense that he put it to the press an easy button. In fact, he literally showed he has a wrist button that sends badniks after people. He uncharacteristically offers Sonic popcorn, saying that they can be friends. Sonic reluctantly tells Eggman what's wrong with him. I love his acting when he says it because he's so sympathetically sad about admitting there's something wrong with him. It's so him. Eggman says it's a velocity to energy ratio incompatibility. Presses a button to open up a wall panel, which conveniently gives him some shoes that would prevent Sonic's problem from continuing. Sonic naturally is suspicious, but because he has no other choice, the shoes solve his problem. Logically, why isn't this the origin of his friction-resistant shoes from the first episode ever then? At that point, it'd make much more sense for it to be Tails who made these shoes to help Sonic. I'm guessing the shoes are a trap. Logically, they'd explode. I really hated that when Sonic referred to himself in third person in a natural way to try to sound cool, like he's supposed to do normally. His so-called friends just insult him like assholes, including Amy, who's supposed to be his admirer. You'd think the main character wouldn't have to deal with this from just one measly time of saying, Sonic's back, or whatever he said. They should just be happy that he's back to normal, not nitpicking the way he talks. Then the shoes have a giant robot face them and try to shoot lasers at them. I guess they had a tracking device on them to lure robots to Sonic, like would make sense. It was amusing that Eggman just calls a giant robot because he was too busy planning a trap to have time to name it. Logically, every robot that has an indescript, forgettable design would be called that. Tails asks how it's possible that it doesn't have a power source. I guess Sonic's shoes power it remotely. Tails figures it out, fortunately. Somehow he also figures out that the faster Sonic moves, the stronger it gets. And logically, Sonic's shoes are stuck to his feet. Like the shoes in Sonic Labyrinth must have been. It makes sense that this all happened instead of Eggman helping him with no catch for no good reason. Styx asks why the robot still has power when Sonic is moving, and Eggman says the shoes store power. Amy smashes a device that was going to prepare a presentation explaining his plan, and it was amusing that he says, do you know how long it took to make that presentation? This was right after Amy lampshaded that he was telling them the plan for no reason, being the cool, relatable audience surrogate when that's supposed to be Sonic, but he's busy being powerless right now. As Eggman says that he's turned Sonic's power against him, I think about how impressively brilliant his plan was. Sonic then looks sympathetically sad and then runs around the giant robot over and over. Well, it's nice enough to not even try to attack him for some reason. Instead of him creating a tornado around it, or creating a sinkhole in the sand from his running, like in other continuities, it's more like his running overloaded the circuits, and the robot died from just that. At that point, what's the point of making him run around the robot in circles? He could run in a straight line and achieve the same effect. And that'd actually be funny because Eggman would get the taunt him for running away, and then eventually the robot would stop working for no apparent reason, and he'd come back. I really hate that once again, Sonic's so-called friends insult him for referring to himself in the third person. This episode had Sonic's speed inexplicably now start causing a sonic boom, or rather annoying sound that bothers everybody because it's not like it creates an EMP or destroys windows. I was really disappointed that the episode never gave a proper explanation about why that started happening to him. I always assumed it was the fault of Tails' machine because it only started happening right after he used his voice activation technology, but that wouldn't make sense either. This is even worse than when Sonic's running was turned against him in Sonic X, because at least there, they tried to explain why it started happening. Some metal fell in his ear and Tanaka used the car locking remote. Well here, Eggman uses some technical jargon that explains what's going on with him, but not why it started. It makes sense if Eggman did this to him on purpose, but like in Sonic X, that's not the case. It also annoyed me that somehow, despite him being the main character and the most respected hero, Sonic being the leader like you'd expect, and telling his friends how to fight the robots to help from the sidelines just led to them being distracted and getting attacked when they foolishly try to talk to him. Like, they totally lack discipline. It sucked because when Sally was doing this, nothing bad happened. Even when she was telling the heroes to execute plans against the Dynamax robot. I feel like every other time this happened in the series, it worked out great. But here, the character just gets made to look incompetent. His friends were being idiots, and then they punish him for making them stupid by tying him to a tree like traitors. Though I understand, but it makes much more sense for them to just put duct tape over his mouth, since this isn't keeping him from talking. That was the problem. They turn on him so easily. It immediately reminded me of when the heroes tied Scourge up instead of letting him fight Robotnik with them and learning how fun it really could be, just because he made a deal with him without knowing any better. He obviously already learned his lesson because he almost drowned him with the swap bots, and before Sonic at that, so they should have just let him help instead of being petty jerks. I guess the fact that Boom Sonic's kind of a selfish egomaniac jerk is why I was reminded of Scourge when he was tied up and smiling nervously. Like I kind of thought that they were doing the right thing and he deserved it. It's fascinating. Anyways, it was interesting to see Eggman help Sonic and solve his problem with shoes of his own. Though it was confusing that he already had the shoes ready right after he determined what his problem was. And you'd think Tails would have made those shoes instead of being incompetent with his engineering being worthless as usual. Seriously, he's an engineer in name only in the show. He's not much of a step up from the other cartoons. I don't buy that any of his inventions would have bugs in it and not work as intended, because he would know enough about science to not make those mistakes. Then naturally it turns out that the shoes have a catch, but instead of them slowing him to a crawl and making him get trapped in his space, or blowing up because they'd have a bomb in them, instead they power a giant robot. That was convoluted. I guess Eggman really wanted to have his victory feel satisfying by ending Sonic in an epic drawn-out fight, and exploding shoes would just be too boring. But he could have had the shoes attract a missile to him, which isn't that different from them having a bomb in them. At least the show had some really amusing moments in this episode that made me smile. Like when Sonic was walking to get a ball and over-exaggerated how long it took in his mind. And when Eggman naturally called the giant robot the same thing anyone would, including myself. And I love that there was a proper explanation instead of it being forced comedy. It was an interesting episode. I just hated how Sonic's friends treated him. You'd think Sonic would always have full control over whether his running made noise, because it'd be a required secondary power to avoid this kind of thing happening. Why didn't he notice it happening the second it did? He was right in the middle of all the noise. He was the origin of it. And yet he had the nerve to insult Tails when he almost fell into lava instead of being concerned. Episode 10-2, Hedgehog Day. We already had a story called that. We started out with Eggman's alarm clock going off and him turning it off. They had a missed opportunity to make his alarm clock shaped like his head, which Sonic the Comic did. Orbot says he wants to make him a special breakfast, and if Eggman doesn't want him to say he thinks, he shouldn't have programmed him to talk that way. He asks if his tank is ready, and we cut to him inside. We see him spying on the heroes in their house, and Sonic walks outside holding a picture of Comedy Chimp. Then Tails chokes on something, and I'm really glad Sonic looks really concerned about him and tries to help. The show needs moments of genuine heart like that, instead of just bored. Then we see Comedy Chimp parachuting and snarking. Knuckles says he doesn't get it. I didn't even hear what Chimp said, but if I did, based on the comedy level of this show, I wouldn't find it funny anyways. Then the heroes fight some badniks, and Sonic warns Tails about one, and Tails uses a sound wave generator to disable it instead of knocking it away like one did the last time I saw one. A fireball gets sent after Sonic, which gets sent back at him, but I forget how. A blue fireball gets sent towards it, and then it turns out it was just a dream of Eggman's as Eggman wakes up. And Orbot says the same thing. He's making him a special breakfast to celebrate Eggman's potential victory against Sonic. Is this just an excuse to reuse Orbot's dialogue and animation? We even see the fireballs crashing into each other again, and Eggman wakes up again. If nothing new proceeded to happen, what was the point of showing us that? Laziness? I think I prefer a clip show at this point. Why is Eggman aware of this? Eggman explains that when the fireballs crashed into each other, it caused a Groundhog Day loop. But somehow, after he avoids going to battle, that doesn't solve the problem. Eggman decides that he can keep refining his plan on Sonic until it's perfect. I don't understand why this loop is happening, so the story is forced. A badnik grabs Amy's hammer, but the sound waves disable it anyways, and then Eggman wakes up again. How can this plot be so much nothing? This Groundhog Day concept was already done by the franchise twice, in Archie and SDC Online, and was never fun to see. Tails then realizes his device isn't working somehow, and Amy's hammer gets stolen. Eggman targets Sonic as he looks red, and he puts Sonic in a bubble. But of course, the loop starts again, instead of us getting to see a long what-if scenario of what would happen if Eggman succeeded. What wasted goddamn potential. Eggman says nothing matters, cutting off half of his mustache. And Cubot splashes his face with water. Eggman looks at his calculations and decides to get Sonic's help. Sonic tells him cartoons are over the counter. How would they be over the counter? DVDs? Eggman tells Sonic and Tails the truth. Eggman warns Tails that he's about to choke on a piece of candy. Sonic's about to get a message from Amy saying the projector's up, and he tells them that Chimp's partner is a ghost, proving the loop exists. But why does Eggman think the loop was caused by the fireballs crashing into each other if it happened even when he didn't go into the fight at all? We have two different times when Eggman goes to Tails for help. And Tails says they'll need a shell to contain the explosion of the loop creator, after Eggman decides he needs to start with Tails earlier. Tails says they need to close it around the anomaly just before it explodes. How did Eggman know what Tails dreamed about? His dream was he was being chased by a giant sock puppet. I guess Tails told him in the previous loop. We see Knuckles carrying the giant invention that has no reason to exist at all because it was invented in a previous time loop apparently. Not to mention, how could it be engineered in less than a day? We see Knuckles drop it and destroy it. And Eggman says that Knuckles doesn't want to fix the time loop instead of thinking that he's sucking by accident. Knuckles says that he's stalling the next day because he doesn't want his tooth pulled tomorrow. Well, I can relate to that. But after Styx knocks his tooth out, the loop starts again. Eggman hugs Orbot the next time he offers him breakfast and says a silly breakfast phrase, even though he always hated that phrase, to the point where I have to wonder why he didn't program it out of him. And Cubot wants to capture the moment on a camera. So what broke the loop? The episode ended there. This is not how you write properly. If it's an episodic show, you have to actually resolve the problem that started in it, let alone explain it. And if the time loop started because two fireballs, they didn't even get a chance to crash into each other. They flew towards each other. And if that's why it started, why did the loop happen again even after Eggman decided to not go after Sonic in that invention? This episode was mostly boring nothingness where it just gave the animators and voice actors an excuse to reuse the same things over and over. At least the clip show was honest about its intent. This could have been a fantastic opportunity to show us what it'd be like if Eggman won. And then we could snap back to normal before he executes his first criminal as ruler of the world. But no. So what was the point? This has to be a budget thing, a cost-saving measure. But at that point, it's just barely better than a clip show. And I'd really hate a clip show for the show because it's not funny at all. So there'd be no point. The only jokes that I can even remember at this point are the so-called funny lines that played as clips in Sonic Dissected videos. So they're not memorable on their own. I just heard them more than once. Like when Eggman said, "Get Amy away from him." SEC Online did this concept better. A wizard made the time loop happen to make Christmas happen every day, so it was explained properly, and Tails talked him into making it stop, so there was a proper resolution. Sure, you can't expect the Boom writers to research the entire franchise first to see if anyone else used their concept for an episode, because they're too unmotivated and don't care enough about the franchise to do that, and would never have the time and care to, say, read all of SEC Online. It'd be nice if they did though, so they could know when they're actually bringing something new to the table, and avoid repeating the same story ideas just to risk doing them worse. You know a franchise has gone on for far too long when it has the concepts of its new episodes have to deal with the pressure of being compared to other times the concepts were done better. Before this episode, I thought Season 1 had plenty of creative new plots, but I've been pretty bored by... I did think the first few episodes had some refreshing ideas, but if comedy isn't working for the show, they should at least have more focus on giving it genuine heart. Having sweet moments where you're reminded that the characters really care about each other, which, yes, often requires that bad stuff happens to them first. Tails choking on a piece of candy is dark, but it's worth it because we get to see Sonic looking at him concerned and helping him out. And Eggman hugging Orba and picking him up was especially sweet, and while most Robotniks would never do that for their robot, I can accept it from Boom Eggman. And at least it's a change of pace for Eggman for once. This show wouldn't be so dull and plodding if it could have a lot more focus on action, so it would always be engaging. Unless it's really that low budget. Why can't it have as much action as Dragon Ball Z? Really, why would that be a problem? What would that hurt? What are they thinking? Comedy does hurt when it's contributing nothing but dullness and annoyance. At least for people with high standards, who don't laugh really easily. This action is generally nothing but the heroes fighting badniks who will die in one hit. So the only source of stakes is that there's so many of them at once. And they're often in the village where civilians could get hurt, but they'll never get hurt either. And I already got really sick of Sonic fighting badniks in Fleetway. And this manages to be even worse because it's literally just the same two types of badniks over and over again. Thank goodness Tails had a sound wave generator, so there was something interesting. But I bet he won't be smart enough to use it in every subsequent episode from now on. At least this means it won't get repetitive and make Tails not do anything new against the robots, but still. Could have seen that machine get destroyed. Lack of continuity is just an excuse for the writers not to try, because trying would require them actually watching the previous episodes, so they can resolve the plot thread started in them like actually talented writers do. There's value in every episode being a self-contained story, like if you're skipping episodes, unfortunately, but not having a story have no real ending. You know, maybe I'd actually like Sonic Mania Adventures better than this. Sure, it has no dialogue, which regresses back to Tom and Jerry, so it seems like a what were they thinking idea. But maybe it's a good thing because at least it's addressing the problem of Sonic Boom and Colors where it was too much dialogue. And instead of focusing on just unfunny lines and the characters standing around and talking, like a modern Sonic game story, instead, I bet it's constant, high-energy, fast-paced action where stuff is always going on. Like Wile E. Coyote shorts, but with Sonic and robots. I found all of the Sonic shows to be boring most of the time, except maybe Sonic Underground, because aside from the songs I had to skip, I didn't feel like there was any padding in that show. You'd expect a franchise with the message of gotta go fast to have a lot more high energy and entertaining shows.